Donald Trump is now set to talk to representatives of the Pakistani army. What is the mood in Israel, and what is being said there about the possible involvement of the United States in the conflict? Both sides have reached a dead end. Israel is beginning to have problems defending itself against ballistic missiles. Iran has access to launchers that are being gradually destroyed by the Israeli Air Force. This could be a turning point. Tehran was supposed to contact Washington and ask for negotiations. According to unofficial information, an Iranian government plane flew to Amman this afternoon, where talks between the delegations were taking place.
Iran's got a lot of trouble, and they want to negotiate. And I said, why didn't you negotiate with me before? All this death and destruction, why didn't you negotiate? I said to the people, why didn't you negotiate with me 2 weeks ago? You could have done fine. You would have had a country. It's very sad to watch this.
According to White House sources, the Americans were very close to sending air forces over Iran yesterday evening. Ultimately, no decision was made, which does not mean that such airstrikes will not take place in the event of further escalation.
For 40 years, they've been saying death to America, death to Israel, death to anybody else that they didn't like. They were bullies. They were schoolyard bullies. And now they're not bullies anymore, but we'll see what happens. Look, nothing's finished until it's finished. You know, war is very complex. A lot of bad things can happen.
At least one American strategic bomber was said to be visible over the Golan Heights, although no one has officially confirmed this news yet. The United States Air Force may already be operating in the area. Iran has threatened that if the United States joins the war, its bases in the Middle East will become targets for Iranian missiles.
Any American intervention would be a recipe for an all-out war in the region with very, very bad consequences for the whole international community.
Iran's spiritual leader went much further in his threats, responding directly to Donald Trump's firm demand yesterday for Iran's immediate surrender. The Ayatollah has a direct influence on the Iranian government's policy, and today he is also trying to save the image of the regime itself. The punishment that the Iranian people and their armed forces have inflicted, are inflicting, and plan to inflict on the enemy is a severe punishment that has weakened it. The fact that its American friends are entering the scene and starting to raise their voices shows Israel's weakness and helplessness. This helplessness is greatly exaggerated as the Israeli Air Force continues to bomb targets in Iran. In fact, according to Israeli media, it also attacked the Ayatollah's hideout. More than 30 fighter jets took part in the extensive attack. It lasted over 3 hours and consisted of 3 waves of attacks. During the operation, we attacked a centrifuge production site, which was intended to enable the regime to continue and intensify its uranium enrichment. On the other hand, Israel does have a problem, and one rather serious weakness: its ability to repel Iranian ballistic missile attacks. Supplies have shrunk significantly, so there are 2 options left: either a ceasefire and negotiations, or help from the Americans, whose open involvement in this conflict could significantly affect the geopolitical situation, and not only in the Middle East. Donald Trump is entering the Middle East game and intends to impose his own order. There will be a truce and an end to Iran's nuclear program, or the Khamenei clan will end its rule in an equally spectacular fashion.
They are also preparing military contingency plans, and this presumably involves the use of the heavy ordnance that only the United States has, that would have to be used to destroy, for instance, the Fordo uranium enrichment facility, which is buried under a mountain. The U.S. has capabilities that the Israelis don't, as good as the Israelis are. So that's the range of what we understand President Trump has asked his cabinet secretaries to pull together.
The Iranian regime could also collapse like a house of cards. This scenario will play out in Tehran or its suburbs, where the country's authorities are hiding. Tel Aviv and Washington already have Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the spiritual and political leader of the Iranian regime, in their sights. We know exactly where the so-called supreme leader is hiding. He is an easy target, but is safe there, We are not going to take him out, kill, at least, not for now. But we don't want missiles shot at civilians or American soldiers. Our patience is wearing thin. Thank you for your attention to this matter. These words were certainly taken to heart by the people of Iran. The streets of Tehran were deserted, but they were primarily directed at the Iranian authorities.
Aby wymienić władzę w Iranie, trzeba zlikwidować klan Khamenei.
In order to replace the government in Iran, the Khomeini clan must be eliminated. And this means not only Ayatollah Khomeini, who is 86-year-old and will soon pass away, but also his son, Mojtaba, who is to be his successor. The inner circle of the Islamic revolution around Khomeini has already been eliminated. Note that the chief of staff of the Iranian armed forces was eliminated, and his successor was eliminated 4 days later. So in fact, the Iranian state is losing its head, both literally and metaphorically. And in a political sense, Donald Trump is looking for an answer to the key question: do Iranians really want change? He must be sure that the Iranians want to overthrow this regime, which has been in place for over 40 years and rules Iran. If he is not sure that the people of Iran want to overthrow this dictatorship, he will not get involved. All the more so because there are no simple solutions in the geopolitical puzzle of the Middle East. Israel has an ally in the region in the form of American troops stationed in the Middle East, but it also has many enemies: Palestinian Hamas, the Lebanese Hezbollah, and the Yemeni Houthis. They are all sponsored by Iran, which supplies weapons and equipment for attacks on Israel. Turkey, Syria, Iraq and Egypt also have their interests here. The Middle East is a powder keg. A small spark can cause a huge explosion. It is clear that the legitimate Iranian authorities have every right to defend themselves against terrorists from Israel and their thuggish methods. What we are witnessing in the Middle East is definitely more than the traditional scares or firing of individual rockets into enemy territory in this region. There are two options on the table: complete change in Iran and the weakening of Iran. If the authorities in Iran are to be replaced, it is now, because in December it turned out that there is a very serious economic crisis in Iran. So there is a revolutionary mood, and the air battle over Iran has been won. The counter-revolution is slowly beginning on the streets of Iran. For now, it's just gestures like this. But as we've already mentioned, this is the Middle East, and all it takes is a small spark.
The Polish authorities initially categorically denied that it was necessary to evacuate Polish citizens from Israel. Today, the first group of Poles arrived in Warsaw. Earlier, when the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was still considering what to do and whether evacuation would be necessary at all, the Slovaks came to the rescue. They evacuated the employees of the Polish embassy and their families. How does this look in the light of the procedures that obviously exist in such cases? First of all, why did it take the Ministry of Foreign Affairs so long to make a decision and implement these procedures? Secondly, where is the safety of Poles in all these heartless procedures? Today, I took a closer look at the situation. Over 20 hours. That's how long the journey took for the first group of Poles evacuated by the Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Since Friday, airports in the country have been closed. That's why 160 people first traveled to the Egyptian border by bus. There, according to the Poles, extensive border guard checks were carried out. After I returned from the shelter to my room, I received a message from the consul. The departure is tomorrow. Do you want to go? At 1:40 a.m. In Egypt, we lost contact with them. But fortunately, just before 7 a.m., they arrived by plane in Warsaw. 6:50 a.m., the first group of Poles has just landed in Warsaw. They left our facility in Tel Aviv and arrived in Poland via Egypt. Another flight tomorrow. Come back safely. This is the first clear statement from the Minister of Foreign Affairs on the evacuation of Polish citizens in 5 days. Earlier, as he himself admitted, he did not consider evacuation necessary. We did not know that rockets would reach Israel and that the number of our citizens there had increased, despite repeated recommendations not to travel there. But while the minister was complaining about the Poles and wondering whether evacuation was necessary, the families of embassy employees knew that it was dangerous. They evacuated with the help of the Slovaks. Irresponsible, according to the government. The Poles did not listen. The government waited. And in the absence of a decision from Warsaw and the downplaying of the scale of the problem, the honorary consul from Bethlehem, who was responsible for transporting people, presented his commercial offer.
Consul.
The honorary consul, who is also the owner of a travel agency, wanted to do good, wanted to help, at a time when no government decision had yet been made. At the same time, other countries took matters into their own hands. The Slovak consul paved the way by guiding people across the borders. The first evacuation route led across the border with Egypt to Warsaw. It was longer, but safer. The next one will lead to the border with Jordan, then from Amman to Warsaw. The route is short, but much more dangerous. Tomorrow, 65 Polish citizens will set off on their journey. Tomorrow, another plane will fly, and this plane will fly from Amman. We decided to organize 2 flights because we expected that the group of our compatriots interested in leaving might be larger. Meanwhile, 300 people from Poland who want to return to their country have registered in the Odysseus system. Fewer than 200 will receive assistance. How many Poles are in Israel? The minister does not know. It depends on how you count. Poles who also have Israeli citizenship are refused help. Consular law explicitly states that assistance should be provided to Polish citizens in case of danger. However, the accepted practice is that this assistance can be refused to a person who has citizenship of the country in which they are staying. The procedures were proceeding normally. Due to political pressure and public pressure, things look the way they do. According to the spokesperson, those responsible for the huge communication chaos are eyewitnesses and journalists, not the ministry. And on top of that, there is the opposition, which took everyone on board 2 years ago. And a few days after the bombings in Hamas, the Poles returned to Warsaw. It was fun back then, complete with an orchestra. According to the law, Polish citizens who are Polish residents are entitled to free transport and evacuation, meaning at the expense of taxpayers. Please call Law and Justice and ask why they wasted Polish taxpayers' money. The former foreign minister responds that it was simply about helping Poles, not heartless procedures. They decided that the interests of Polish citizens were less important than pressure from some European Union countries. But when the Slovaks decided independently to carry out such an evacuation, then under pressure after a 2-day delay, the Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs made the same decision. And in crisis situations, we cannot afford even a few hours of delay. Unfortunately, Polish people who were left to fend for themselves in a country at war assessed the actions in a similar way.
The elderly.
Pope Leo XIV also expressed his concern about the escalating situation in the Middle East and other war-torn regions of the world. During today's general audience, the Pope appealed for peace and emphasized that everything can be lost through war, thus referring to the appeals of his predecessors, including Pius XII, who called for an end to aggression on the eve of World War II. The heart of the Church is torn apart by the cries coming from places engulfed in war, especially Ukraine, Iran, Israel, and Gaza. We cannot get used to war. Therefore, in the name of human dignity and international law, I repeat to those responsible what Pope Francis used to say: war is always a defeat, and with Pius XII, nothing is lost through peace, but everything can be lost through war.